Coming out of the 2012 drought, one of the most popular questions we're getting right now is, how about herbicide carryover? Should I be real concerned about this going into next year?
You know, that's a good question, Brian, and it really depends on where you're at, because it's not, oh, okay, are you in Arkansas or are you in North Dakota? No, it's what county in Arkansas are you in? What rain did you have in your area? And 2 miles down the road, was it totally different? Because for a lot of guys, yeah, oh yeah, boy, you go 5 miles down the road and they had, you know, this extra rain that we didn't get, and they had all this extra plant growth.
Yep, but rain isn't the only factor. So obviously, rain is very important. We need rain to help break down some of these herbicides. But, you know, rain can push herbicides down deep into the soil to some degree, but a lot of the herbicides, they're not going to move that much in the soil. How they're going to break down is bacteria. And if there are no bacteria living because it's so ridiculously dry, that's the reason why you have the carryover problem. So just keep in mind, bacteria are the #1 creator of herbicide breakdown.
All right, well, you talk about drought and its impact on bacteria. Let's also talk about soil pH. That's just a huge one. When you've got a pH that's way out of whack, and let me tell you, I would say at least 90% of farmers across the country probably fight this. There's a small area in my field that's high pH, or there's a small area in my field that's low pH, or all the ground in our area is high pH or low pH. If you're way off the base, if you're below 6 on pH, if you're above 7.5 on pH, you're starting to get to those extremes where certain types of soil microbes are going to have a tough time surviving, and certain pesticides are going to be more likely to carry over in your ground.
The product definitely makes a difference. For example, if you're using atrazine, you know you have way more carryover than if you're using Buctril. Buctril doesn't even really have any soil residual. But then in addition to the product, it's the rate that you're using. So if you're using a low enough rate, we're probably not all that concerned about it. If you're using a high rate, it's a much bigger deal. One of the other big factors I always look at is how much of the herbicide actually landed on the ground and how much landed on weeds and crop. So for example, if you had solid seeded soybeans and you had solid weeds out there, there's probably not a lot that's going to hit the ground anyway, so you don't have nearly as much risk for carryover.
Well, like for example, this year we had lamb's quarters. We had them just super thick, already starting in late March and early April.
We didn't.
Oh, everywhere, Brian. They were all over the country, and guys would go out and spray those patches. I'm not too worried about carryover because they were so thick. I don't think we even killed all the lamb's quarters. We couldn't get through that canopy. So if you're in those situations, it's less of a concern.
All right, let's talk specifically about products in corn, soybeans, and wheat. Which ones are we most concerned about? Let's start with corn. In other words, products you can use in corn, and if you're going to rotate to some other crop.
All right, I'm thinking about atrazine. I'm also thinking about that HPPD family with Callisto, Lotus, Impact. In soybeans, I look at things like Pursuit and Raptor are certainly high on my list. Flex Star is also on my list, especially where we farm.
Anything that contains classic. So there are some of these products like Enlight and Envive, and there are a bunch of combinations that have classic in there. Probably not a big deal in a lot of cases, but this year it could be, especially in high pH ground.
In wheat, I look at Husky. That's got some potential carryover to certain crops, you know, especially if you get into peas, edible beans, lentils, those kind of things. If you're in a rotation that has some of those things in it, you definitely have to be concerned if you didn't get any rain this year.
Moisture, heat, time, and pH. Those are probably the biggest factors. And obviously moisture we didn't have. We had plenty of heat though. And as far as time, it seems like there's time for breakdown because planting occurred early, spraying occurred early. It's been dry and warm into the fall. There are a lot of these factors that really aren't that bad, but and then obviously the pH thing varies a lot in your fields. So when you're thinking about your fields, we also want you to be thinking about the whole field, not just most of the field, because I very often ask farmers, well, what's your soil pH? Oh, it's around 7. No, it's not. Okay, there are areas in your field I'll guarantee you are low, areas in your field I'll guarantee you are high. Those are the real problem areas that we're worried about.
Now when we talk about products, again, we kind of went through a quick list here, but certainly pay attention to your local state university. Most of the universities now are trying to make guys aware of the products being used in their state, maybe in some different crops that we aren't talking about here. So do take a look at lists to see which products you've used. Talk with your local agronomist because your local weather was different and your local soils are certainly different than here.
Well, some of those products you mentioned, Darren, hopefully are going to control our Weed of the Week. We're going to need something that's going to. We'll talk about it coming up next.